The man in the Murray-Darling hot seat is Authority Chairman Craig Knowles. The one-time New South Wales Minister for Infrastructure, Planning and Natural Resources spoke to Peter McCutcheon as the second round of community consultations on the draft plan draws to a close.
Mr Knowles, we're over halfway through this consultation process for a very ambitious reform program. Do you get a sense you're making any progress?
I do. I think it's becoming more obvious to me from the numerous, endless conversations I have with groups and communities and the submissions that are beginning to come in, but the people want to move on. I think they've understood that a plan's necessary to give certainty to communities, and whilst there's obviously a world of difference in views between what a good plan might look like, there is, I think now, a genuine understanding that only a plan will end what has been, generations of arguing and fighting between the various stakeholder groups and the government jurisdictions, the states, the territories and the Commonwealth. And in many ways what we're seeking to do here is continue that journey that John Howard and indeed Malcolm Turnbull started back in 2007 when they identified that the way we manage the Murray-Darling system historically has passed its years by date, that the tug of war between the states has to end, and more contemporary commentary by Tony Windsor in the parliamentary inquiry needing a way forward. Now, you only get that if there's a structure and a plan, and I think people are coming to understand that, and we are picking up a degree of support for an opportunity to move forward together.
One of the biggest complaints from irrigation communities is uncertainty. They've come out of a long drought, they've been talking about water reform for decades. To what extent does that make your job all the more difficult? You're dealing with communities already under stress.
Yeah, look, I think that's a given. I think we all acknowledge we've been through one of the deepest and toughest droughts since Federation. And of course, right at the moment, we're seeing that old chestnut, a land of drought and flooding rains being played out in real time in the northern part of the basin. What we're trying to do here is recognise the fact that this plan has to make us more resilient for the inevitable next drought, put in place things that will allow us to be better prepared, and also allow some of those communities that do get a higher degree of uncertainty than I think is necessary, deal with that by letting them get involved. Our plan is full of the concepts and principles and supporting mechanisms that allow communities to take a real hand on the steering wheel and let people have a say in the management of their part of the basin.
The draft plan is short on some important details, and as a result some irrigators are happy to fill in the blanks. Now, I've heard talk of 30, 40, 50% of water rights will be taken away from some regions. To what extent does the authority encourage that speculation, because it hasn't provided the details?
Well, two things. First of all, as the government has said over and over again, they're not interested in taking away anything. If people want to sell their water, they can, but if you don't want to sell your water, you don't have to either. So this notion that I think is bandied around, perhaps in part as a fear campaign, of a compulsory acquisition is just nonsense and wrong. Secondly, it's been communities right throughout the basin, not just in this journey of mine, but in previous policy efforts that I've been involved in, who've always said, look, if you let us have a go, we can show you a better way of doing things. So when we talk about the need for detail, part of the detail gets filled in over the 7 years we've allowed for the implementation of the plan by local communities. Just think about it. I could prescribe to the last letter a plan, but it would be seen as a plan handed down from upon high, telling people what to do without letting people into the game. By creating a framework and creating an opportunity for communities to get involved, you do get the opportunity for better outcomes and more lasting results.
Of particular concern is the shared amount that has to be taken out of the southern basin, 971 gigalitres. We've got no detail on that, on how it will be shared. Do you understand that's causing some grief?
Well, we've adopted an approach that historically was part of the thinking behind the National Water Initiative when John Anderson was the Deputy Prime Minister and I was the State Minister for Water. At that time, irrigation communities right throughout the basin were arguing for the separation of water from land and for water to be part of a tradable commodity, establishing a market for water. To do that, you have to have an open market. And since that time, since John Anderson's times, a lot of the barriers to trade have been removed. The ACCC have been interested in some of that. And so by identifying a global volume, what we do is allow a market to prevail. Having said that, I have very little doubt that in the end this will be an argument between the states and the Commonwealth. Inevitably, South Australia, I believe, will argue for a market-based mechanism, whereas Victoria and New South Wales are more likely to argue for what's known as a state share, a proportioning of that downstream contribution. In the end, I think that will be a negotiation by our parliaments. In a democratic system, I think that's probably an appropriate place for it to play out.
The one detail nearly every irrigator says they'd like to see concerns environmental flows. How will this 2,750 gigalitres be put back into the environment, and how will it improve the health of the system? When will we see those details?
Well, there's a lot of detail already available on our website, and of course I make the point that of that number you mentioned, the 2,750, we're already more than halfway there. So the plan is really about how you go about implementing the remaining objectives. The detail of that in environmental watering plan reports and so on is all available in voluminous documents. Let me just try and shorthand that for you. As a result of what we seek to do with that water, there will be substantial improvement to the environment right up and down the system.
But I guess farmers need to be convinced of that. And
well, farmers first of all, can be assured that the documentation is there for them to read if they choose to, and I would encourage them to do that. But what's more important here is many farmers that I've known over many years already participate in using their wisdom and their knowledge to improve local environments as part of their catchment management regimes and their on-farm practices. Our plan puts forward a framework and encourages that localism, that local wisdom to come and take part. In the town of Mildura in this region, there are any number of really good examples right now and over recent years playing out where local communities have taken charge of environmental flows, watering regimes, and manage that water, not farmer versus environmentalist, not government versus community, but working together to make sure that all of the benefits and the balance we seek to achieve, social, economic, environmental, are actually achieved. It's playing out here in Mildura. There are many fine examples here that will be good pointers for the rest of the basin.
Craig Knowles, thank you.
Thanks very much.